All right, welcome back to the PricePlow Podcast. Today is May 22nd, and today I'm super excited to be joined by Laura Katz, founder and CEO of Helaina. We recently talked about effera, but today's going to be really the big deep dive into what it is and how it's changing the industry. So, Laura, thank you so much for joining us today. Really excited to get in and chat today.
Ben, Mike, thanks for having me.
Awesome. Well, I think we should probably just start with a background. Could you give us a little bit of background on how you started Helaina, what got you to this point?
Absolutely. So I'm a food scientist by training. Making food products has always been where my passion lies. And this was going back several years now, 2015, 2016. I was on the subway here in New York City listening to a podcast about how people buy breast milk on the internet from strangers. So it was really about this black market for breast milk. And I thought, okay, this is interesting. Why are people going online and buying breast milk from strangers? That doesn't seem the safest, but there's something behind this. Breast milk is so magical. It's filled with all of these actives you can't find anywhere else. And that is what people were looking for. It wasn't just parents going on the internet for breast milk. It's bodybuilders, athletes from all walks of life, cancer patients. We saw so many different types of people looking for the actives, the bioactives found in mother's milk. And there's no question on why they're doing that. It's really the world's most perfect food. It's been perfected over the last how many thousands of years. And that was the only place that they could find the valuable components that breast milk can deliver. And so I thought, as a food scientist, well, we can solve this problem by replicating these components of human milk. So the most valuable things that we find in there, which are the proteins, the bioactive proteins, these things that enter our body and help to build our immune system for the first time, our cognition, our gut. And they're actually produced in our body, not just in human milk, but all throughout our body from birth to end of life. And so I thought, well, we have the tools and technology. It exists to replicate these things. Someone's got to go do it. And I guess it's me. So we started Helaina. And by we, I mean, it was just myself at my kitchen table in the Lower East Side in 2019. It took me a few years to actually, save money to go do the thing and to start the company, and surveyed breast milk, really tried to identify what is moving the needle here for our health and what do we need in our body as we get older. And lactoferrin, which is one of the main molecules of colostrum, human milk, it's in our sweat, our tears, our saliva, vaginal secretions. It's found all over our body, in our brain. This protein is really fascinating and could be something that changes the trajectory of nutrition if we can really replicate it properly with the right structure and function and bring it to nutrition. So that was really where the evolution of Helaina came from. And now we're here 6 years later from when, I officially started the company with our first product, which is effera, a replica, a human identical of lactoferrin.
That's awesome. It's actually not the first time the black market of breast milk has been mentioned on the podcast. So I'm kind of enjoying the progression here, because previously we talked with a brand that tried to kind of create it through things that were available on the market. But what you're talking about is really like a bio-identical creation of this that people can trust and use on its own. Could you talk to us? I mean, I don't know if Mike has any other directions, but I'd really love to talk about how you're sitting at your table in the Lower East Side, and now you have a lab, you have an ingredient on its own. Like that's a pretty daunting undertaking to create all this. Like, what was that process like?
I will say I was naive enough to not realize how difficult it was going to be, which I think is a great position to be in when you start a company. I mean,
Yeah.
all I knew was that it was going to be really expensive. And that was the thing that scared me the most. Not, can we figure out how to make this? I was like, this is solvable. This is all solvable. We figured out how to replicate insulin. We figured out how to replicate these really important things that we interact with daily. I had come from the world of alt protein, so making alternative meats and alternative dairy. And so I saw so much innovation going into these products. And really it was to replicate things found naturally in meat and in milk that make the products taste better. And I thought, well, all this technology exists. What if we really channel it towards nutrition and health as an outcome, as opposed to just taste, which, look, taste is king when it comes to making food and supplement products. But I knew that it was possible and someone had to do it. And so I sat there at my kitchen table in the Lower East Side. I had done all of my research on breast milk, which, it's constantly evolving and we're always learning more. And I had, really started learning about it years and years and years before I started the company, when I was an undergraduate student taking a nutrition course. So that was kind of where my personal interest for breast milk started, which sounds a little weird, but really it's a fascinating fluid. And I sat at my kitchen table and I just started cold emailing investors, because I knew, okay, we have to get a lab up and running. We need people. We need, all of the different things to do our research. We need to figure out, where do we get donor breast milk to really understand it. There was all of these things that I started to solve for, but the most important thing was raising enough money to really get the resources we need to start our research. And so I just cold emailed investors, and most people didn't respond. I had, a list of people. I was 26 at the time. I didn't have a network myself. So it's not like I could just go to somebody who knew somebody. I had to really invent it from scratch. And a few people responded. And with that, we were able to raise our first set of capital that got us off the ground. And very quickly after that, COVID hit. So we had to navigate, how do you build a company and, get this off the ground with the money that we have, which was, just a small amount to get started. And people have to work from home. So, and we have a lab, right? That you can't do lab work at your house. I mean, you probably shouldn't, at least. So it was fun navigating at the start. But I think what really helped us move forward was how visceral this makes people feel. Breast milk, mother's milk, is our first food. It's something that we all hold in common, and it feels something that we can all connect to. And a lot of folks that we work with or have brought in have been really focused in nutrition and have tried a lot of solutions for themselves and have never landed on the best way to, build their supplement regime or really feel healthy at any moment, and have all experienced something. And so there was something that connected everybody to the mission that we have as a company, which allowed us to really push through some of the tougher early days.
Okay, yeah, this is fascinating. So I definitely want to back it up a little bit. So you start, and also I was going to make a joke like that bodybuilders are looking for breast milk, and you actually went there. It is a part of the black market.
Yeah.
I was thinking, yeah, the majority would be women who are having trouble breastfeeding or whatever, looking for it. But you start looking into breast milk. There's a ton of great stuff that comes out of it, lactoferrin being a main thing, but we already have lactoferrin on the market. So what made you decide that the existing lactoferrin on the market was so not worth it that you would go through all this stuff to make a better one?
Great question. There's a few things that made us kind of start with lactoferrin. And I say start because we built a platform to replicate human bioactive proteins. So there's a lot more to come, is
This is
what
just
I
the
can
beginning.
say.
Yeah.
This
Okay.
is just the beginning. Why did we start with lactoferrin? Right now, the lactoferrin market, we have lactoferrin coming out of cow's milk. And cows aren't great producers of lactoferrin. Evolutionarily, they haven't needed it the same way that humans need it. So we have 10 to 30 times more lactoferrin in mother's milk compared to cow's milk. The lactoferrin that we can take out of cow's milk is in small amounts. So the industry right now purifies or filters it out of cow's milk. There's about 1 kilogram produced for every 10,000 liters of cow's milk. So it's a very ineffective process to produce this ingredient that can be very powerful, and that limits the global supply. So there's really not a lot of lactoferrin floating around in the world, and that leads to something really expensive, price volatile, and at the end of the day, it's an allergen. When I started Helaina, the hypothesis, which we've now proven, is that human proteins for humans are more effective, efficacious, absorbable, bioavailable than cows' proteins, We are not cows, right? So the way that we've thought about it is it's human immunology for humans as opposed to cow immunity. We look to bovine or cow-based ingredients, colostrum, lactoferrin, all of these different things, and we're not cows, so the immune impact that we could see from something that's human could potentially be that much better. So it was both supply chain challenges that we've seen across the industry, and I had done my digging and had spoken to a lot of companies who were trying to source lactoferrin, as well as this hypothesis that if we can make it human and we can make it so that our body can identify it, could this be that much more potent and beneficial for our health? And what we've seen to date is yes, it can be.
Yeah, that's exciting. And we're obviously going to get into some of that. One thing you had mentioned real quickly earlier is that you had been into alt proteins. Yes. So you already kind of knew that you can make proteins from stuff. Like, can you give us a little bit of your background on that? I'm guessing from the food science world, and tell us about whatever you were doing with the meats or whatever.
Yeah, so I was developing products for companies. That was what I did before starting Helaina. I'm not a molecular biologist, so the really nuance of some of the science behind what we do was not my specialty. I knew enough to be dangerous, so I knew that it was possible. I knew the kinds of scientists that we would need to bring on, so I had enough understanding of how to get started, but I'm certainly not an expert in that type of engineering. The work that I did was much more food science focused, so formulating products with ingredients that existed. So I never made my own ingredients in alt meat and alt dairy. So I worked on launching an alt meat chicken nugget product, so an alternative product that ended up being pretty successful. I'm sure it was reformulated since I started it, but that was something that I had worked on for a startup. I'd made a plant-based milk, actually a few plant-based milks. So I was well steeped in the industry, and myself as somebody who has always been like truly just obsessed with food, I stopped eating meat in 2007 or 8. And that was a very different time for the alternative protein space. So out of a personal interest lens, I had just followed along because I wanted to know what was going on. I was always buying and trying things. And quite frankly, a lot of them are not the healthiest products that you can buy. But to me, it's always been interesting. So I kind of gravitated towards that out of personal interest, using my background in food science to really apply my knowledge to make new products. And with that, I got exposure to all of these new technologies that were cropping up, or new uses of these technologies, because a lot of the way that we're making these new nutrients has been borrowed from the pharma industry or have been used in the food world in different applications.
Okay, gotcha. So you had that background. You knew that these capabilities exist. You see the black market of breast milk, and you realize, okay, well, maybe we can make some of these proteins without having to get it from cows and everything. One thing you've mentioned a couple times is colostrum. And when I've been doing my digging out there, it seems to be like confusion over what the lactoferrin versus colostrum. Can you kind of give us the lay of what is colostrum, and then we'll get into what is lactoferrin. But you kind of mentioned that lactoferrin is in colostrum. So like kind of distinguish that for the people who don't understand all that.
Colostrum is the first milk that mom produces after birth. That milk is very different than what we think of as what we will call mature milk, or regular milk that you would see a lactating mom produce, or a cow we buy at the grocery store. Colostrum is really, really rich in bioactive proteins. It's thick, it's sticky, it's kind of yellowish in color, and it has a high concentration of lactoferrin, the protein that we make. Colostrum that you can buy, at the supplement store or online comes from cows. So cows produce it for a few days after they give birth, and then that liquid that they produce, that they secrete, turns into regular milk. It contains in cows a high level of IgG, which is an antibody, lactoferrin, but at much lower levels than what humans produce, and other actives that helps to kind of kickstart baby's immune system. In humans, when we produce colostrum, the ratio of these actives looks pretty different than from cows. So we see 7 to 10 times lactoferrin in human colostrum compared to cows' colostrum. There's also a big difference in the antibodies. So we have IgG, which is the antibody immunoglobulin in cow's colostrum, and we have IgA, secretory IgA, which is the antibody in majority quantity in human colostrum. So it's this first milk that we're producing, but there are pretty distinct differences between what the cow is making and what the human is making.
Okay, gotcha. Okay, so and this is, I guess this is in your area. So the cows, all the colostrum we see on the market right now, after the cow gives birth, they're going and taking that stuff like immediately from them.
Yes.
I just realized that they're kind of stealing it from the calves as well, and while doing that.
Yeah, we like to say look, everyone has different preferences, I would say, but there are certainly ethical issues with taking colostrum from cows. And of course, as you would imagine, okay, you take the colostrum from the calf that needs it. Well, what do they eat? So there's essentially like colostrum type formulas, just like you would have infant formula, but for cows when we take the colostrum from them. So they try to replicate that structure and they give it to the calves who don't get their mother's colostrum if we're taking it right away. So, that's something when we think about how do we create a more sustainable future for nutrition, we certainly don't want to be advocating for that if we can make alternatives like our effera that can provide the benefit that we would see out of human colostrum or one of the key benefits, and then we can hopefully eliminate this practice of taking colostrum away from these baby calves.
Yeah, I hadn't thought of that. The pill just sunk in a little deeper for me on that one because I don't know, we love cows around here, and it's a shame that we're doing that when there's possibilities that you could do better. And so okay, so let's get into lactoferrin. Like, give us the whole spiel on what is lactoferrin. Why do I want it? Can I make it myself? Do I only get it from drinking milk? Like all that stuff. And then we can talk about some of the use cases that we have, because I know there's a lot.
Lactoferrin is a glycoprotein. So glyco meaning sugar. It's a protein. It's a set of amino acids that all form into this nice link, and they fold into each other, and they have little sugar decorations. It's this bioactive protein found in high quantities in our milk. It's in our saliva. It's in our tears, in our sweat. It's found all over the human body. We're constantly producing lactoferrin from birth throughout our entire life. It's an iron binding protein. So what it does in our body is it binds iron more tightly than anything else. That's the key feature of lactoferrin. And through that mechanism, it helps to build our immune system, our gut, our cognition, and has several different roles. How does it do that? It binds iron and it takes it away from the things that might need iron. So when baby is exposed to breast milk, it's the first thing it's their first line of defense is how we think about it. And so breast milk enters the body with all this lactoferrin. Lactoferrin enters our gut. And if things are in there that might infect us or may, threaten the baby's immune system, lactoferrin's job is to attach to iron, take it away or sequester iron away from the things that might infect us. And those things, presumably need iron to grow and survive. Iron modulates in our body. So having good iron levels and the right ferritin levels is important for our overall health. Too much iron can be inflammatory and cause a lot of challenges. Too little iron can lead to anemia, iron deficiency anemia, and a lot of other challenges. Lactoferrin's role in that is to make sure that iron is getting to the right place in our body at the right time. So when there's too much iron, it can sweep it up and make sure that the iron in our gut doesn't go into the bloodstream and have too high of circulating iron. It can also help us better absorb iron if we are iron deficient. So it has this nice modulating feature. And through that feature, it can be anti-inflammatory. So it helps to suppress inflammatory cytokines, the things that basically make our immune system get alarmed and cause inflammation across the body. And we've shown, proven pretty well with our data, that our effera, human lactoferrin, does that really effectively, pretty similarly to how, the native does in our body. And it really is this, we'll say, multifunctional protein that does so many different things in our body, which signals to us the importance over time. I'd say the last piece here that we're finding incredibly fascinating at Helaina is just how our lactoferrin levels endogenously, so the stuff that we have in our body, change over time. So we have high lactoferrin levels, of course, when we're breastfeeding, and through pregnancy and actually delivery of baby. And as we age from 0 to 3 years old, our lactoferrin levels decline pretty quickly as our immune system matures. But as we go through life and we may experience, call it, threats to our immune system. So we get sick, or even through neurodegenerative diseases, our lactoferrin levels decrease, and supplementing with lactoferrin could potentially have the effect to kickstart the immune system. So there's a lot of different roles and functionality that this protein plays in our body. And the other really interesting thing about it is it lives everywhere a microbiome is. We have an oral microbiome, lactoferrin is there. We have a gut microbiome, lactoferrin is there. We have a vaginal microbiome, lactoferrin is there. We have skin microbiome. It's in our sweat, and it helps to keep our skin healthy. So this protein is, we believe, going to really change fundamentally how we think about our immune system, our microbiomes, and really the future of where nutrition is going.
I like what you hit on at the end about the declining levels of lactoferrin. As you were talking about how much lactoferrin we have everywhere, I was reminded of a bunch of different supplements where, we supplement it, but we already have so much of it. So what's really the point of supplementing if we have so much of it? Outside of declining amounts, could you talk about the benefits of using it even though we produce it endogenously?
Yes, so we are all producing different amounts depending on what we experience. So people who have a lot of inflammation, which is very common, it can be due to different disease states, due to, metabolic factors, due to exercise, right? We get really inflamed. That suppresses our own internal production. So our immune system can, kind of go into high gear trying to figure out how to solve and work through that. Supplementing with lactoferrin is really this defense mechanism that we can build for our body. It's this ability to better really improve our own internal levels when we are in those times where it may dip even further. So we see this as foundational. We're producing it, supplementing with more. Think about something like collagen or creatine. We have it in our body, but there's also benefit to supplementing with more. And what's really unique about effera is it's the human version of the protein. So our body recognizes it as its own and can actually bind to our receptors in our body much more effectively than the cow's milk version. So we can, call it, boost our internal levels and see all of the value and the benefit that it should be providing to us for our immune health, for our gut, for our cognition, in a way that you just can't get from other sources.
Awesome. Okay. Before we get into the effera and the technology, all that, because I think that's interesting. It sounds like not all lactoferrin is the same exact lactoferrin in ways. So you almost made it earlier sound like the lactoferrin is a thinking thing where it's like going to fix the iron over here or regulate it. I'm guessing it's not a sentient molecule or protein or whatever though. So is part of the body, is it the immune system that's kind of directing the traffic, or who's making those decisions on where to send the lactoferrin? And is it possible that we could just trick our body into making more without as we age?
I actually don't know the answer of if we can trick our body into making more, but that's a great question, and we can't say no. It's bioactive, so when we think about nutrients like sugar doesn't, it provides us calories and that's about it. It provides 4 calories per gram. It can break down in the body during digestion. these proteins, what makes them smart, what makes lactoferrin smart, is its high affinity to bind iron. So it can actually, there's a force that allows it to grab iron. There's two little lobes that can grab iron really strongly compared to anything else. So it's that affinity that it has and other metabolic pathways that allow it to be a little bit smarter, you can think of, than the average protein. So
like a magnet almost.
Sorry?
I was going to say like a magnet almost.
Like a magnet, exactly. That's a perfect analogy, like a magnet. So it's not, 100% perfect like anything else. If it's bound to iron and it can release iron, it's not, this isn't an AI molecule, so to speak, but it's pretty smart in terms of where it knows it needs to go in the body. And we have it kind of sitting in all of our tissues as well.
Awesome. And okay, and just so everyone's listening, or it's like for the record, I am a massive, massive, massive proponent of lactoferrin, and I'll get into some of my personal use case with it. But but with that said, the question becomes: once you look at the lactoferrin research, it's almost like a slam dunk. It basically is a slam dunk for almost everyone, unless you have terrible, crazy reactions to it, in which case, like, some people just start with really tiny doses and move their way up. I guess the question is, after that, why use effera instead? And you've kind of started alluding to it. So kind of give us the difference between effera, and human and bovine lactoferrin,
Yep.
and kind of talk about the technology and what you're doing differently.
So the way that we make effera is similar to how insulin is made today and other really valuable molecules for the human body. We take yeast and we teach our yeast how to make this protein so that the structure, what comes out of the other side, and we purify all the yeast out. We make something really pure that has the same amino acid sequence as the native human lactoferrin, so what our body produces, and the same folding and all the same structural elements. And, we've also proven that the way that our body recognizes it shows that it's bioequivalent to what the body makes. Why would you take this compared to bovine lactoferrin? Well, what we've seen in our own clinical studies is that the body recognizes ours as self, and the cow's milk version is, you could say, kind of rejected by the body. So in the clinical study that we ran, we had an arm of participants who took bovine, cow's milk, lactoferrin. Their immune system produced antibodies against the protein, which means that it's kind of trying to clear it out of our system. And if the body is trying to quickly clear this protein out of the system, it's not going to be able to stay in there and do the things it needs to do to be active, to be effective. And we didn't see any antibodies produced against effera. That sounds kind of obvious, right? It's human. We're going to recognize it as human, but no one's ever proven that before. And we can say all we want about, that human is better and we believe it's what people should be taking. But seeing that data was pretty interesting to us because no one had ever run a study looking at the immune system's response to these two proteins side by side, the human version and the cow's milk version. We also see that our effera, human lactoferrin, digests the same way as the native human, which is different from the cow's milk protein. Lactoferrin is unique in that it's not just a protein, but it's made up of all of these active peptides that are all characterized and well documented in the literature. And what we saw is in our digestion studies, effera, human lactoferrin, is digesting. So breaking down into the same bioactive peptides as the human version, as the native version, and the cow's milk protein is different. And all of these signals are showing us through all of the data points we're collecting in preclinical and clinical models that what we've made is better tolerated by the body. And if we think about optimizing our body in the best way, giving it something that we recognize that we can actually use and that we've proven we can use for us, is where nutrition should be going. I would say, from other preclinical work that we're doing, we're seeing the inflammatory response from our protein effera compared to bovine is very different. We're seeing a dampening of inflammation many-fold larger with our effera compared to the bovine version of the protein. And I think we're just starting to scratch the surface of how these proteins differ. They're both lactoferrin. We call them lactoferrin, but one was designed for a cow and one was designed for us.
So this is like kind of one of those situations where like we had a previous podcast talking about beta lactoglobulin, and he kind of talked about it really being like protein being a soup in ways. So like this isn't just like one molecule; it's really a conglomeration of a bunch of stuff. Is that kind of like where lactoferrin kind of sits?
Lactoferrin is one molecule.
It is. Okay. Sorry.
I will say, I'm going to get a little nerdy for a second.
Please.
There's like different, I'm going to call them glycoforms of lactoferrin. So it's this amino acid sequence and it kind of folds in on itself. And then you get these little sugar decorations. There are, as mom produces breast milk, or as we have lactoferrin throughout the body, there's different structures of sugars that get attached. So different glycoforms of lactoferrin, but they're all pretty similar. Beta lactoglobulin is an interesting one because it's a whey protein found predominantly in cow's milk. It's actually not found in mother's milk at all, which is very interesting because there's a lot of folks making, we'll call it beta lac, and the predominant whey protein in human milk is alpha-lactoglobulin, the alpha form of the protein that's much easier for our body to digest. And so whey as an entity is a combination of a lot of different types of proteins. In humans, it's predominantly alpha-lac. In cows, it's predominantly beta-lac. But then you have a whole host of other things in the soup, we can call it.
Interesting. Okay, and so when I see lactoferrin, it's kind of got like a pink hue to it. Is there already iron loaded into it, or do we want that, or how can that be tweaked while you're in your process, or is there something else that's making it pink?
You're spot on. It's the iron that makes it pink.
It is, okay.
Yeah, the iron makes it pink, and you can tune up or tune down the amount of iron that's bound to the lactoferrin, at least in our process. In breast milk, it's about 20% bound of the lactoferrin that we find, and that can range. So what we make at Helaina with our effera is about 50%, 50 to 60% bound to iron, and we can tune that up, we can tune that down. What's nice about using precision fermentation is we can be precise. And with that technology, we can make it, more or less bound to iron, but we've found this 50 or so percent kind of in the middle from very, highly bound at 100% or, no iron bound at 0% is a nice place to be, to have something that can flex in different directions.
That's interesting. Okay. We'll get into my story. So like, I assume the typical demographic for lactoferrin is it generally going to be women?
I think it really depends. So we've heard and we've, worked with folks who have high ferritin levels, which we see more commonly in men than in women, and athletes who have really taken to lactoferrin and are really interested in using this and have seen positive effects for themselves. There's a really big opportunity in women, and that's because the other fun fact about lactoferrin is it's estrogen mediated in the body. So during times of high estrogen, we see high lactoferrin production. And as we think about women who their estrogen drops dramatically, perimenopause through menopause, there could be value there in supplementing with lactoferrin. A lot of the symptoms of menopause are inflammatory, frozen shoulder and, different things that women experience. And so there's a lot of opportunity to bring this as a supplement to those women as we see them going through these changes and their lactoferrin levels internally are declining. So there's a lot of opportunity with the female population. I would say the other piece where we've seen pretty strong clinical data is around pregnancy. When a woman goes through pregnancy, her blood volume increases 1.5 times. That's pretty major and dramatic over a 9-month period. So what's common is that our iron levels go down. Iron deficiency anemia is really common in pregnancy. In fact, so common that doctors don't always do anything about it. I myself, in both of my pregnancies, had, iron deficiency. It wasn't quite anemia, but iron deficiency. And the doctors were like, oh yeah, like if, you can take an iron supplement if you want, but this is really common. Like the response is shockingly like, yep, this is just something women go through. And it's like, well, I feel like we can address it because iron deficiency can lead to, different types of health outcomes for baby, low birth weight. There's a lot of different things. And we've seen clinical data to show how lactoferrin can improve all these different blood parameters around iron, blood hemoglobin levels. So that's a really interesting use case as we think about, starting life with a healthy baby starts with a healthy mom. So there's a lot of different areas where we see lactoferrin having really an important role to play in nutrition.
Okay. So what we like to do on this podcast, or I like to do, is sometimes like start playing formulator and stuff. So it almost sounds like there's opportunity in the prenatal vitamin space that no one's even thinking about with what you're talking about.
100%. Prenatal vitamin, whether it's formulated in the actual multi or call it a booster, a separate type of product, really big opportunity. And you can pair it with iron. So you can pair it with like a ferrous sulfate or something like that. You don't necessarily need to, but it's shown to be effective when you pair it with a ferrous sulfate, and you don't really need to do too much with that. The other thing about lactoferrin that's different than an iron supplement is you don't get the GI distress. If you're just loading yourself up with iron and it's all kind of floating around in your stomach, it doesn't feel good, and your body doesn't actually absorb it very well. This is a little anecdotal, but one of my cousins is a hematologist, and in my this past pregnancy I had, when I was like, oh, I'm iron deficient, what should I do? She was like, well, you can just keep giving yourself iron supplements, but you're only going to absorb so much. So more is not more with that concept. So introducing lactoferrin, especially in that prenatal mix, could be really impactful.
Yeah, I totally agree. Now, given that, let's say I'm taking 300 milligrams of effera and it's 80% of it is bound to iron. Do you have to like label iron on the supplement label, or is it counted in the dietary intake? This is more of a regulatory question, but
sure. No, it's a good question. It's a very small amount of iron. So what we make is about 50% bound. It doesn't really contribute to the iron level that you would see in a supplement or nutrition facts if you were taking significantly more. So babies, for example, babies have, call it 1 to 3 grams a day is what they're exposed to in human milk. So if you're adding this into a baby supplement or an infant formula at those levels, right, that's much higher than what an adult would take, then you would start to impact the iron as you would see it on the nutrition label.
Okay. And so you kind of alluded to it a little earlier. We've got one use case of pregnancy. Another one, obviously, we have a kind of a sports nutrition centric type of channel. So you mentioned athletes, obviously endurance athletes. There's a lot of people that go, I don't know the exact phrase, and some sort of anemic or whatever. So like what are the use cases in that situation? Because I'm pretty sure with a lot of guys, especially, you don't want to, like you said, you don't want to just keep throwing iron at them. My personal opinion is that iron's got to go somewhere, and it might just end up in the liver. But that's me right there. So, like, how would we talk about this in terms of athletes for both men and or women?
There's been great clinicals on athletes with iron deficiency anemia, improving their blood hemoglobin levels, just supplementing with lactoferrin or combining that with an iron source. What we've also seen, which is very interesting data, is lactoferrin combined with creatine improving lean muscle mass. So there's a few different areas to play with when we think about formulation for the athletic community. I really like the combination of lactoferrin and creatine. I mean, creatine is so interesting, and there's so much benefit, cognitive benefit as well, mental clarity when we're thinking about athletes going into big races or whatever that might be. Our mental clarity and our cognition are so important. So that combination of creatine and lactoferrin can play a great role while also being an iron regulator. So athletes who have maybe, low or high iron levels, it can go in either direction, can have a more mediated system for iron availability and how it's floating around the body, and especially kind of in our tissues and in our blood.
Yeah, it seems.
Awesome.
Sorry.
No, I'm sorry, I'm taking over a little bit too much. So I was just gonna say, just yesterday I was pitching someone a cognitive type creatine supplement because we keep hearing this coming up, but we're
Yeah.
not seeing a ton of supplements in that neighborhood. And
Yeah.
I didn't even think of adding the lactoferrin, even though I did know about the study you're talking about. I want to like re-pitch it. So like this is awesome. Sorry.
I mean, it passes through the blood-brain barrier. What I'm really interested in, and I will just say we have not done a clinical study in this space, but there's some really kind of interesting emerging data on lactoferrin and neurodegeneration. The theory is that lactoferrin, can call it mop up iron in the brain, and something that we've seen connected to neurodegenerative disease is too much iron floating around in our brain. And that can lead to oxidative stress and, some of the things that cause degeneration of our brain and all of the related symptoms. And so that, to me, the cognitive piece of this is something that could be really powerful. And of course, with creatine, it's just, I think that would be a really cool supplement. If you want to pitch it to somebody and, reference us, like, please do, because I think it's a big
we,
opportunity space.
we will talk. Yeah.
Yeah.
Someone's got to do it. So someone
Yep.
listening can go for it. Sorry, Ben, what were you going to say?
No, you guys hit on it. It's great. I'm loving the way the conversation is going. I sometimes think like something like our lactoferrin here doesn't always have to simply be about iron. I mean, there's a lot of benefits to it outside of just taking up iron. And I think especially like in the athletic space, sometimes we see this with supplements. We study them in very specific pigeonholed ways, but I think there's a lot of benefits for athletes outside of just pulling up iron as well.
To me, the inflammatory piece, if we think about recovery and, athletes who want to just keep going and keep pushing, we're getting pretty inflamed, and, we don't need to completely eliminate inflammation. Some is important and good for our body, but I think from an athletic perspective, that's really interesting. And of course, as I mentioned, the combination with creatine, especially for women, I think women see creatine still as like this bodybuilder thing, and it's just so much more valuable than that. It's, it can be for women and men and anybody who wants to take it, and the combination with lactoferrin would be a really cool product.
Yeah, it makes sense. And every year we're seeing that change a little bit with creatine. So it's coming along. It's definitely taking its time. And like you mentioned that I don't think you're eating meat still. So like people who don't eat meat, especially, there's a bunch of stuff that you probably want to make sure you are getting enough of. Creatine, it can be made by your own body, but it's like metabolically expensive. And we excrete 2 grams a day. So if you're not eating meat, like your body's going to want to try to make 2 grams a day or so to store the phosphocreatine and the ATP, everything in the muscle cells. It might as well make your life a little bit easier. And there's definitely like vegan sources of it. So
Totally.
that's the creatine pitch. I want to go back to one thing. I'm not sure if you mentioned this or if I'm wrong. So was there a study where they actually increased blood iron serum levels without taking iron, but it was just done because lactoferrin alone? Is that kind of...
We've seen lactoferrin alone improve iron parameters across the board.
That's awesome.
Just as an individual source. You compare it with ferrous sulfate, but I don't have the study up right now,
right.
but I've seen that data and it's really compelling. So, supplementing just with lactoferrin on its own can have that overarching impact that we don't totally get from an iron supplement.
Yeah, that's what's crazy to me, and that's where I think maybe it's getting stuck in the liver for some people, because like this is an element where our bodies are not just going to, we're not like sun reactors or anything. We're not just going to make an iron atom, so it's
Right.
somewhere. And if you're taking this supplement, which has like a tiny amount of iron in it, but like noticeably and clinically raising iron levels, then we're getting it from somewhere. And
Well, it's right. If you get it from food and your body doesn't absorb it well,
gotcha.
it can be floating in your gut. Like iron can be sitting in your gut and we're getting it from different sources, but we're not able to use it effectively. And what lactoferrin does is it gets our body to use it effectively. So we don't necessarily need more iron. You need to transport it in the body where it needs to go. You need to take it from the gut and move it into the bloodstream or move it into the different tissues. That's what lactoferrin facilitates. So you don't necessarily need to take more iron. You need to use your iron effectively.
That makes sense. I like it. Okay, so that kind of brings us over to another use case. Like we often see, colostrum. We've seen many different things up and down, come and go, and everything. But one area where it sticks around in perpetuity is really in the gut health space.
Yes.
So you've kind of mentioned this, like possibly just through scooping up some of the iron in the gut. But it seems like lactoferrin in the gut health space is probably one of the bigger markets, I'm guessing. Is there anything you want to speak to on that?
There's a lot of different roles that it plays in the gut. First, in preserving junction integrity, so the tight junction proteins that help to create the integrity of our gut so things don't pass through too freely. Leaky gut is what we often hear the term for that. So by its ability to decrease inflammation, it can help preserve these tight junction proteins and the integrity there. It also creates an environment to improve levels of bifido species and other important bacterial species in the gut that help to create a good environment. And these bacteria help to, produce short chain fatty acids. So we see better profiles of short chain fatty acid of folks who are taking lactoferrin because of its role in increasing beneficial bacteria. And the other way that it works is by in our gut taking, through the iron mechanism, iron away from the things that may infect us, therefore reducing, GI distress through different types of pathogenic bacteria. So the role it plays in the gut is incredibly fundamental to our overall health. And if we think about why lactoferrin is really valuable and how we see it in breast milk, the baby's gut is their first line of defense. Everything starts and stops in the gut. And so that's really where lactoferrin started to have its really big benefit. And I think, honestly, where it's been probably studied the most is its role in gut health.
Definitely. And then after that, oftentimes immunity supplements. You touched on it a little bit with the antibodies and everything.
Yep.
Anything specific there?
So it helps to suppress inflammatory cytokines. And we've seen that with TNF-alpha, with IL-6. And in this ability, those are pretty key to our immune system by decreasing inflammation. It's overall an immune protein. And that's what its role is to interact with our immune system. So when we think about colostrum, I love this example. Before colostrum became what it is today, that so many folks know what it is, there's all these big brands that are selling it. There was a market for colostrum. It was just a small market, and it was often used for travelers' diarrhea. So people who were traveling to places where, now people may take probiotics, pre or postbiotics, things for our gut. People were taking colostrum for the role that it plays in helping to improve our immune system and our overall gut health. And now it's become, mainstream and it's in the zeitgeist, but lactoferrin has a pretty big role to play in our overall immune and gut health. And I always think about travelers using it, which is, a time where our immune system is incredibly vulnerable when we're in a new environment, as a good example of the power it can have.
Awesome. Okay. It's basically, okay, I'll get into my story just a minute. My opinion, I love the molecule. I'm becoming increasingly sold on a fermented human lactoferrin over bovine, just because, when you show that there's antibodies made when you're taking a cow's milk based protein, it kind of makes sense. And it's not, and then I guess the question becomes really like, how pure is effera? Like, is it 99.99% or whatever? If it's like, we talk about this with creatine, actually. So some creatines pass lab tests at 96%. Well, guess what? I'm taking 5 grams a day. That's 200 milligrams of other stuff, air quotes, So that's, what is the other 4% is oftentimes my question when they're talking about a low yield creatine, because creatine can be made from some nasty stuff. And I don't know if I want 200 milligrams of nasty stuff possible in my body. So the question comes back to you is like, what percent yield are you getting with effera, and like, what is the other stuff?
Purity is incredibly important. We think it's important, for all stages of life, but, ultimately one of the end users of this product is babies. So there's no risk that we're willing to take there in terms of the quality of this ingredient and across the life cycle. Our product is incredibly pure lactoferrin, so usually around 98%. What's the other stuff? Moisture. So there's moisture in the ingredient. There's some residual water. We make this into a powder. So powders are usually, call it sometimes, 5%, 6% down to maybe about 2%. We also have, I'll call them like residual salts. So salt. It's not high quantities of salt, but in the spray drying process, so we dry this into a powder, so it's really easy to formulate with. You can throw it into almost anything and it's really stable. There's a little bit of salt in that process to make it dry into a powder. So that's about it. That's all that's in the ingredient. What's nice about this process is there's no animals involved, so there's no other stuff. It's all incredibly well characterized, and we've published all of this data. So we've published our characterization paper, which is what we call that internally, that shows exactly all of the stuff that's in this ingredient.
Okay, that's pretty cool because makes sense. All right, Ben, did you have anything else?
Yeah,
I was gonna
ask about applications. You hit on this quickly, and I'm pretty sure I know the answer. But it's soluble. It's able to be put in pills, powders. Like, can we talk about how we use it?
Pills, powders, gummies, which is exciting. If we look at the colostrum market, you need grams of colostrum. You need 100, 200, 300 maybe milligrams of lactoferrin, so it formulates into a gummy really well. It's heat stable, 85, 90 degrees. And, that is sufficient to make gummies. So we've done that. We've made yogurt. Low pH environments it's good in. We've made beverages. We've made bars. We've made it all. And what we need to do at Helaina, I think, to have a lot of integrity around the ingredient is we test for recovered lactoferrin after. So is this present? Is it still there? Is it still there in good integrity? And we do find time and time again with different applications, it's doing really well. I will say it's not, steel, so it's not going to be able to withstand really long heat exposure for really long periods of time. So high heat for, over 30, 40, 50 minutes, an hour, super processing, it's not going to withstand that. But most every other application that we have seen, it's going to be doing really well in there. And minimal taste, right? This is, there's not much flavor when it comes to lactoferrin. It is a light pink powder, but when it's formulated into other things, it kind of just disappears unless it's just straight powder on its own. So it's a strong ingredient when it comes to formulation. And we have customers that are using this in all different kinds of products and seeing good results.
Awesome. You said, does it come out as a liquid then when you're processing? Because you said you spray dry it.
We spray dry it, yeah. So it starts off as a liquid, which we, in theory, could freeze and, ship and do what we want with it. But it's just less stable in a liquid. Liquids go bad faster. And our goal is to make something that is easy for formulators, has a good shelf life, and has the highest integrity. So we do, after it's in liquid form, we dry it into a powder, like a protein powder.
What do you spray dry it on?
Nothing.
Got it.
We don't put any carriers in our spray drying. That was a very important point to me because, as you guys probably know better than I do, a lot of people are using maltodextrin or different types of starches when you spray dry. And when we were first developing the process, I was like, absolutely no maltodextrin. Absolutely none. There's no value there. We have to figure out a way to dry this without any type of carrier, which is not easy. So we actually have a little mini spray dryer in our lab where we've done testing, and we do a lot of spray dry testing because, spray drying also uses heat, it uses pressure, and so you can really impact your product through spray drying. So we've done extensive, probably more than we want to admit, testing in the spray drying environment because I was very positive that this had to be just straight lactoferrin when it goes through the dryer. It doesn't make it easy, but we've solved for it, and our recovery is actually really good.
That's awesome.
Yeah, because you could pass a lab test when it's a liquid, but that's not what people are getting sold. So you need to make the lab test all the way through. Yeah, I mean, I've been at the point for a while that I think every brand should have lactoferrin somewhere in the lineup. But as you see, the question really is, where do you want it? Because you could put an athletic supplement, you could put immunity, gut, like multivitamin, just like next to iron, like there's a ton of different places, the nootropic, the creatine thing. So that's kind of like where my head's at, is like, it belongs somewhere. You have an ingredient here that's just a powerhouse. Just how do you want to use it? And that becomes like kind of a marketing and platform question. So
Totally.
I'm that bullish on lactoferrin. So my story is that I do have high ferritin levels. I've talked so people who listen to the podcast regularly are gonna roll their eyes. I've been hearing this for a little while. So my message to guys, especially because I'm not on TRT. Like oftentimes guys on TRT are gonna get pitched, or they're gonna be testing for ferritin.
Yeah.
I was 42 years old in December of 2023 when I first ever had my ferritin levels tested. And they're basically, I mean, I've seen higher, but they're basically through the stratosphere at 772, which is, you generally want this like under 70. I'm like 10x. I'm a level of magnitude too high. And I've dealt with joint issues and, like inflammatory type conditions for a while. And it's always been joints. And so my first thing was, and what I should have done immediately is go donate blood. And we'll get into that. But what I did was, for 6 months, I actually wanted to see what happened when I didn't do any blood donation. And I took lactoferrin, and lactoferrin got it down to 722, which is still through the stratosphere and everything. But a 7% drop, I think, was pretty solid. And it showed me that there's some efficacy here. However, and things are slowly progressing and getting better. However, like, I'm pretty sure I've done everything in my life possible to get iron overload. I began donating blood. And after the first blood donation, I went swimming about 3 days later, and I could not believe how good my shoulders felt. It was unbelievable. Like, I felt like I was in high school again. And I realized I've been like fighting against my own body for quite a while due to the high ferritin levels. My iron levels look totally normal in my blood. I wanted to say that. So I'm not sure what's in my liver, but I suspect there's iron overload, but my blood does look okay. Either way, ferritin's like just through the roof. So after 3 blood donations in January of 2025, now 43 years old, I got it down to 485. Still high, but I'm like trending down. And honestly, the joint health has been better than ever. So that's like the most exciting thing for me. But I'm kind of happy just for this conversation, is like, I'm happy that I didn't go crazy right away or anything, and tried a few things. And I did see that lactoferrin did kind of move the needle a little bit, but when your blood work is as bad as mine was on that one thing, it's time to start dumping iron. And that's where the blood donations have made a huge thing for me. So that right there showed me that I was like very excited to see that this is something that like it clinically does make an effect. However, I was beyond just like waiting for years and years and years for lactoferrin to do its job. So I went to the blood donations, and I've been hitting it every 8 weeks and just absolutely loving it. But I can't state it again. I'm such a true believer in lactoferrin, and I think like my data points, I share all my blood work online. Everything else looks pretty good. But yeah, that's been like the biggest thing in my life over the last couple of years. So guys, if you're in your like 20s, 30s, like you don't need to get everything tested all the time, especially in your 20s and stuff. But if I had a trend line of testing ferritin even like every 3, 4, 5 years, I'd at least know when it started getting higher. I have no clue when this all like got out of control for me. I could have some of my guesses, but like you shouldn't be 42 years old before you're finding out when you have a problem. That's like way too late in the game, in my opinion. So like get some sporadic blood tests once in a while. That's my comment. But either way, that's why I appreciate lactoferrin, and I'm so excited about this conversation because I kind of saw it do some work, and I'm still taking it.
Well, I don't know if you have ours yet, but we should send you some, because I would, maybe this is your own self-experiment. See how your body reacts, if at all, differently to effera compared to what you're taking right now. But something that this is, more on a personal level that I feel so strongly about is, primary care doctors need to be really understanding at the personal level somebody's health when we think about all the different blood markers and how they work in concert together. I mean, I'm sure that, this is so much behind what you care about in your work, but you could have found this out earlier if your doctors were really tuning into you and not just, standard of care, which is, its own can of worms of challenges.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'll be honest, I don't go to the doctor all the time, but yeah, that's just never been something that anyone's ever tested. It's almost like you only get tested for ferritin and some of the iron stuff when you go on TRT, but that's not, some of us need more work. So that's why it's a smart idea to kind of rotate through. I basically was tested, the standard lipids and everything. Go on a statin in your 30s, like that type of thing. So I've kind of opted out of that type of system myself. But when you do that, you really better like start digging into the research. And there's hundreds of dollars worth of lab testing. But I'm happy I found it because I think this has been like the life/game changer for me. But yeah, I'm definitely with you for sure. It's something you got to take into your own hands. And And that's why no one wants to be spending like over $1,000 on blood work every year unless you're like very sick or whatever. Get what insurance covers. But some of these things, every few years, I do think you should get tested for sure. So I don't think I have a whole lot else. And we did just get some effera packets and everything.
Great.
So yeah, thank you. Yeah, well, I think Ben's gonna start once in a while posting on the story, and with protein powder. That's another use case. We see colostrum get added to protein powder. Why not a little bit of lactoferrin? It mixes well in there. There's no problems with like anything like that. So
we have a product launching with a brand partner called Lavelle Nutrition, and it's a protein powder, a chocolate protein powder with our effera in it. So that's going to be hitting the market soon. I think it's a great application. It makes it easy, right? If you're going to be using protein powder anyway, you throw it in there, it works, it's going to blend in, and it just makes, people don't want to have this huge stacked supplement routine. And that's something that we're seeing more and more commonly. This can really pack a punch in a small dose, could eliminate the use of other types of supplements depending on what it is you're taking, and just throw it into what your routine. Routine is, we don't want to come here and shake it up. However you take your supplements or take your nutrition products, the easiest way to take lactoferrin is if it's already in there.
Mm-hmm. And one thing we didn't talk about is the dosage. I got more questions. But yeah, what is the general dosage that people take? What should they start at? Where are the claims, or where's like the recommendations that you have as a company?
In the 100 to 300 range milligrams is what we're seeing is efficacious. Clinical studies have been run at all of those doses from 100 to 300. Commonly around 200 milligrams is what we're seeing. And so I think it's really person dependent. I can say like my mom right now is taking effera, and she's taking 250 milligrams a day. We see efficacious doses at 100 milligrams. That's probably more common in supplements, is that 100 milligram dose. And we've tested up to 3.4 grams a day for like a safety factor, and it was totally safe. You want to test at really high levels just to make sure there are no issues, and babies are exposed to a few grams a day. So what we recommend for the general healthy adult population is the 1 to 300 milligram range, and children can go below or above.
Gotcha. And okay, so one thing is like a lot of the stuff that we've talked about was researched using the bovine lactoferrin. Is it fair to talk about that in the context of effera, since it's not exactly the same thing? Like where do your lawyers sit with that?
That's a good question. We can glean a lot from that data. We have our own data sets as well on our effera when it comes to dose. Because this has a higher binding affinity in the gut and throughout the body compared to the bovine lactoferrin, we can dose this lower and still have a good beneficial effect. So those studies are reference studies. They're not completely different proteins, right? They still fundamentally do a lot of the same things, one being more effective and more tolerable in the body than the other. So we use that data as a jumping off point because it does give us a lot of insight. And then, we run our own research on top of that to expand our knowledge on human version of the protein and specifically effera. So we can dose this at lower doses and we're seeing good effect. And for our customers, that's great because it makes it even easier to formulate with. They need to buy less and use less to have a stronger impact. So, it's not 1-to-1 when we think about the two proteins.
Gotcha. All right, Laura, I did hear the baby number 2 in the background there.
Oh,
So,
I'm sorry if you're
oh,
hearing
no, I was going to say, hey, we've taken an hour of your time. I don't have any further questions. So generally we just finished off with like, how do we follow you? If you have a personal Instagram or generally LinkedIn, we'll link to in the show notes and everything. So yeah, let us know how to follow you and the company. And if you have any like closing comments, but yeah, I don't want to tie up too much of your valuable time, especially as a mother of 2 here.
It's been a lot of fun to chat with both of you. I love to talk to people who are as nerdy in nutrition as I am. Truly, like, I am so annoying to the people at home who I'm like talking about these things and buying new products online, just out of personal interest as well. I mean, this is my favorite kind of conversation. So it's been a pleasure.
Oh, thanks.
Where can you find us? On LinkedIn. You can follow me, Laura Katz, and our company, Helaina. Don't have much of an Instagram presence yet, but maybe it's something that I should do because I do like to talk about this stuff. I would say any formulators in the audience, or if there's any folks that are really interested in effera, reach out to us, Helaina, through our website. You can also email me directly. I keep my inbox totally open to anybody who wants to talk to me about this. So it's laura@myhelena.com. So reach out to me. We're always happy to chat about this. And I would say, maybe a call to anybody in the audience that would want to do research with us. We're just at the beginning of running clinical research. We have so many studies that we want to run on different populations, looking at different outcomes. We always have clinicals running. We do right now. We have a couple. We do a lot of preclinical work in our lab. So if there's anybody in the audience who is interested in doing research with us, we believe that it's not just us who's going to make this happen, but it's the entire community of people coming together. And we always want to be working with folks to move the needle forward in lactoferrin and human bioactive research.
Awesome. Can I have one more question? 1 more minute?
Please.
Okay. You mentioned this is only the beginning. This is a technology, it's a platform.
Yeah.
Are you willing to say what's next or anything? Because you did mention alpha-lactoglobulin. Is this a possibility, or is this something I'm going to have to edit out here?
You don't need to edit out. What I will say is we have a platform. It's a really cool platform that can make human bioactives. And we have a lot of kind of machine learning and stuff underneath the hood that makes it power. And I mean, we just have like the brightest scientists that you can think of working on this. So the sky's the limit in terms of what we can make. And we've, worked on a couple things in the background. What I will say is human milk remains our inspiration. Mm-hmm. So the really well characterized and well understood actives in human milk are where our focus is moving forward. So that's the most that I can reveal at the moment. You could take a couple guesses on what that means. And we just need to make sure that anything we make has really strong clinical validation to show that it's going to have a strong impact in the human body. We're not going to go make lactose found in human milk. I mean, that's right. A sugar, not a protein, but that's not moving the needle for us. So it's really focused on the actives.
Incredible. Okay. Laura, thank you so much once again for your time.
Thanks, Mike. Thanks, Ben.